But again, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. My name is Abby Greason, and I am a coach with Goer. I actually knew Julie in college. We went to the same school, so this is kind of fun for us to reconnect for this event tonight. But we are so grateful, and I kind of want to give it over to Julie to share a little bit about herself. Kind of introduce yourself to the group. Let us know where are you from, what have you studied, all the fun stuff.
Yes. So I mentioned that I'm from New Hampshire, and I lived there up until college, and then went all the way down south to Texas to to go to the University of Mary Hardin Baylor.
Go Crew.
And yes, go Crew.
Go Crew.
Studied nursing, got my nursing degree, and then moved to Waco and worked in a hospital for a few years. Got such valuable experience working with adults and children. And then God kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, it is time. And he had put international ministry on my heart. So I left for the field when I was 24. But as young as that sounds, it was like a 15-year process getting there.
Yeah.
And so it had been something that he'd had on my heart for a really, really long time. And I had been working at the hospital, and this placement opened up that I'll share about in just a minute. And it was like God was saying, okay, now this is your opportunity, and I'm giving you the choice to step into it.
Yeah.
So that was really exciting. And so now I serve in Ecuador, working at a home for women and their children coming out of human trafficking, domestic violence, other vulnerable situations. And we have a lively, always exciting home with all of the ups and downs that you would expect with a home full of women, and a home with 4 children under the age of 6. And so I love it. It is crazy. It is fun. It is heartbreaking at times, but it is also just a place where I see the impossible made real because of what God is doing to bring about healing and restoration in their lives. And so I am incredibly blessed to be a part of this ministry.
Yeah, that's so cool. And Julie, it's so cool to like hear you talk about it, like to have known you in college and then get to watch you walk into this and see how the Lord has provided over and over again. And just to see your heart for it is so cool. And I'm excited for those of you that are on this call tonight to really get to hear Julie's heart in this ministry that you're a part of, and to see this whirlwind of experience that you've walked through, because you've been on the field, what, a year?
Yeah.
All that happened in a year.
I know.
Which is so crazy.
Which it happened in a COVID year, so I feel like that counts like about 5 years.
Probably.
But
anybody else out there feel like maybe the year has been a little bit longer, a little bit more of an impact?
Yeah.
For sure. Well, man, I want to open us up with some questions. But before I open it up for you guys to ask some questions, I want to ask you some questions that were sent in. So a few of you guys on here, when you signed up and got the Zoom link, sent me in some questions, and I took notes of those. There were some that were similar, which was super cool. Some people have the same questions. So I'm going to start with 3 questions that were sent in from our audience. And then after that, that's when I'm going to open up the floor for you guys to unmute and ask Julie any other questions you can think of. But Julie, let's go ahead and dive into these questions. The first question that came in, I love this question. This is something that as a coach with GoCore, working with our candidates, I get all the time. The question is, can you tell us what a typical day looks like for you serving in ministry in Ecuador? And obviously that looks different day to day. That looks different via COVID. But kind of think through, what would a typical day look like for you if you were in Ecuador right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So like you said, every day is a little bit different. And I have days that are designated for doing the more administrative sides of my job, which are a different kind of fun, where I get to write my newsletters and communicate with my supporters and all the paperwork that it just takes to live a life. But kind of a typical day where I'm at the house, I tend to work the afternoon, evening sort of shift at the house. So, which is lovely for me because I get to like wake up and kind of like slowly start my day, which is just so much more fun for me.
I agree. I'm not a morning person at all.
So I can do that. I'll usually get up, try to get a very, very brief workout in.
Love it.
And have breakfast. And then right now, my 2 roommates teach at the local English immersion school.
Okay.
but they're teaching from our apartment because of COVID.
Okay.
So I'll usually see them a little bit as they're doing their thing, and then I will head off to the house. And it takes me about half an hour, about 10 minutes of walking, and then a 20-minute bus ride to get from my apartment to our home. And I will typically just be, surrounded by kids from like the second that they hear the front door opening, it's like, someone's here.
Yes.
And it's really fun.
Yeah.
And so my day is kind of spent doing a mixture of keeping the house functioning and running and making sure that no one is dying and no one is setting the house on fire. Because we have 4 children under the age of 6.
Yeah.
And also making sure that the women are able to focus on their work and school. And particularly in this season with COVID, everyone is at the house, which is nice in some ways, but it's just an extra level of complexity of how do we keep everyone able to focus on their things. So I'm doing that, but then also as the nurse at the house, I have my own responsibilities for nursing of I have a weekly meeting with all of the women to talk about, do you have any new symptoms that you feel like we need to discuss?
Wow.
Do we have any doctor's appointments coming up that we need to prepare for or call and make an appointment? Or how do you feel like the medicine that you're on is doing, and do you feel like it's affecting you in any way? Do you have any concerns you want to talk to me about?
Yeah.
And so I get to do that, and I also am responsible for keeping up our medical inventory and making sure that basically anything healthcare within the house is my purview.
Okay.
And so I get to make sure that all of that is running smoothly, as I'm also trying to make sure that the house is not burning down, which is sometimes a challenge. And I have definitely learned to go with the flow. Ecuador is a very relational culture. And so things don't happen on my timeline most of the time. And so just figuring out like, okay, so I didn't count my meds today, but I did have a really good conversation with one of our participants about something that was concerning her. And so really reevaluating what are the true priorities.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear you like talk about the skills you are using in that role, both in what you studied in college, but also things that you've just learned. You talked earlier about being in this ministry of reconciliation, and I think the Lord is in the ministry of reconciliation. So the fact that you're getting to step into that is just so cool. Okay, cool. So thanks for sharing that. The next question kind of jumps into a little bit of that. Yeah. So tell us, what skills then, both nursing and personally, do you feel like you're using the most, or maybe you've used the most since being there?
So personally is really what I just touched on, of learning to continuously realign my priorities with God's priorities, about being flexible in there are things that need to happen in order for our lives to function, in order for things to go. But most of the time, and something that my sending organization, One Collective, really emphasizes, is that we value people over projects. And so my like projects almost always will come in second to like having a conversation with a woman. And that, as like a very detail oriented type A personality, like that's not a natural thing for me. And so that's something that I have just learned a lot, and being really self-aware in that is probably the biggest skill that I've continued to try to develop, as if the more self-aware that I can be, the more I'm able to adjust my behaviors so that and my heart, honestly, so that they're in line with what my priorities actually are. And when they're not, like, okay, what's happening in my heart and what's happening that's causing me stress or tension, that's pulling me away from my true priorities. So that's personally been something
that's awesome.
Wow, has that been a journey this year? Skill-wise for nursing, I really think that health education is probably the largest portion of my job. And it's something I was trained on in nursing school, but was definitely not the biggest part of my job when I worked in the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but most of my job now is working with our women to say, hey, let's talk about the things that are happening in your body so that you can recognize what is normal, what isn't,
Yeah.
where are you at, and this is your body and your healthcare. And so let's talk about what medications are you on. You need to know what you're taking and why you're taking it and what it's supposed to do and what you should be watching for.
Yeah.
And okay, you're having this symptom. So what does that mean? And does that mean we need to go to a doctor? And most of our women have multiple things that they're dealing with because they've all gone through trauma, and that affects our bodies in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And so I sat down with one of our women actually, and we made a list, and she eventually needs to go see like 8 different specialties. But we sat down and we talked about, okay, what is your priority? Let's look at the top 3 things that are most concerning to you, because it's not my decision.
Yeah.
Like, I can give advice, and if there was something that were truly urgent, like we need to deal with this now, obviously I would step into that.
Right.
But just giving them autonomy and ownership over their own bodies and their own health, and educating them about how to make those decisions has definitely been the biggest skill that I've had to continue to develop in my role.
Yeah. That's so cool to hear. That you get to just kind of come alongside them in this journey and take these skills that you learn in nursing school, this education you have, and then use that to then go into these lives and say, hey, this does matter. You do matter. This is important. That's so cool. And it sounds like the personal and the professional skills kind of all mold together in this world that you're in, which is kind of awesome. Like the professional and personal skills are both growing. Okay, one last question that was sent in before we jump into you guys asking your questions live tonight. Tell us a little bit about your journey in getting to the field. You can share as much about that as you want to, support raising, what did that look like? But tell us about your journey in getting to Ecuador. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so like I said, this was ultimately a 15-year journey from God first putting international ministry on my heart to me stepping off the plane in Ecuador. And so there are a lot of different pieces to that I'm not really going to be able to give justice to, because I don't want you guys to listen to the story all night long. I want to hear your questions. But I think that for me, it's just been a journey of God saying, trust me and walk this path until I show you what the next step is. And I had in mind for a really, really long time. So when I was about 9 and decided that I really wanted to go into international ministry at 9.
Cool.
Actually, really cool story. So I was about 9. I was reading, I don't remember the publisher, but I was reading these autobiographies of missionaries.
Okay.
And so I was reading about Gladys Allward and Amy Carmichael and all of these kind of like heroes of the faith almost. And that was really kind of one of the things that sparked my heart for international ministry, particularly Gladys Allward and her story about rescuing orphans in China. And I got to Casa Adalia, and we have a bookshelf, and on the bookshelf I saw that literal same autobiography that I read when I was 9 years old. And I was just like, okay, God.
Full circle.
Thanks. Thank you for that little thing that you put on my heart. And so that was really cool. But it's just been this journey of God being like, okay, so I'm putting very specific things in your path. Like I'm putting your heart for helping people find healing physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And so I'm going to lead you into nursing. And then I'm going to lead you 2,000 miles away from your home and from your family to go to Texas for college. And that is where you're going to learn how to live independently, and as much as I love my family, learn that I can live separate from them, and I'm willing to do that if that's where God has called me. oh, and at that college, you're also going to have a college pastor, and his wife is going to be connected with this missions organization called Goer that you never would have heard of.
Yeah.
And through Goer, you're going to find one collective who you never would have heard of without them.
Yeah.
And just, oh, and you're also going to become super involved in anti-trafficking work in college. And this thing that I put on your heart where you were going to work with orphans in Africa in an orphanage, that was there for a reason. But now I'm going to combine that with your heart for anti-trafficking work, and I'm going to show you a place that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put all of this together in all of these different areas that I've made you passionate about for this purpose.
Yeah.
And even now, as I'm looking at, I am here and I'm in my role for a reason, and I love my role and I love what I'm doing, but I'm just continually learning to let go of my vision of the future.
Yeah.
And of like, I really thought from the time I was 9 years old that I was gonna graduate college, move overseas, and then never come back to the States. And I'm learning now to just say, I am where God has me for right now. And if everything that he did brought me to this point, maybe all of that was so that he could show me something else.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And I haven't failed at what I thought I was trying to do.
Right.
I am actively listening to what Jesus is telling me, and that's the best place to be. Yeah. So that's really been just my journey of like, okay, God, whatever you have next for me, I'll do it.
Yeah. It's cool that you say that, because I think that as a coach, I've gotten to work with some like really stellar candidates, and some of them are on this meeting, on this event tonight. And that's a huge thing, is just this idea of trusting the Lord and walking in obedience into where he's leading you, and knowing that he has a plan and that he is going to lead you in that. And I love that that's been such a big part of it. And I think it's such a gift from him to be able to connect those dots from your past to where you are now, and then to say, okay, whatever comes. I can look back and see your hand all throughout my life, and these sparks that started me to where I am today. That's so cool. Thank you for sharing those things.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay. Now I'm going to open it up for you guys in the audience to go ahead and unmute yourself. Maybe these questions have sparked a question that you have for Julie. Maybe you came with a huge list of questions to ask her tonight. I don't know. But I would love for you guys to feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and just throw some questions out that you have for Julie about life on the field or life as a goer, or, whatever questions you have for her. Yeah.
Ask me anything.
I can kind of see all the screens. Okay, it looks like someone unmuted. Carly, maybe?
Kathy? Probably hi, Mom.
Oh, is it?
Hi. So, greetings from New Hampshire. I put something in the chat box for you. I don't know if you can see that, but basically it's maybe you could think of something that you thought would be easy in this transition that turned out to be hard, and vice versa, something you thought would be really hard that hasn't been as hard as you thought.
Good one.
She has good questions.
That's a good one.
Okay.
Take it away, Julie.
Yeah. No, that is a really good question. So something that I thought would be hard, we'll start with the second one.
Yeah.
That turned out to be easy. I was really concerned about just the details and like finding community. And I knew when I moved that I was going to live with a host family. But then after that, it's like, I don't know how I'm going to find an apartment, or if I'm going to like know anyone who I'm going to want to live with.
Yeah.
I lived by myself when I was in Waco, but I didn't really want to do that in Ecuador. And I was super, super concerned about that. And actually, so day 2 of being in Ecuador, the country started nationwide strikes. And so the first 2.5 weeks that I was in Ecuador, I like couldn't leave my host family's home. And there were like burning tires in the streets, the whole 9 yards. It was
welcome to Ecuador.
Welcome to Ecuador.
Welcome.
Yeah. And so with that, kind of towards the end of those 2 weeks, my team actually went on a retreat. And while we were there, we were coming back to the city, and one of my coworkers was like, hey, I just think it would be really good for you to have a day or two where you can not be in your host home, not have to be thinking in Spanish and dealing with all of this and processing all of this at the same time. Come back to my apartment with me. We have a guest room. Like, just come stay with us.
Yeah.
And so I stayed with them for literally one night before going back to my host home. And then from there, turned out that that coworker was planning on moving back to the States 3 or 4 months later.
Okay.
So right around the time I was going to be leaving my host home, and her two roommates, after that one night that I was there, got together and went, so we kind of want Julie to move in.
Yes.
And so maybe a month later, after they had that conversation, I had no idea. And so I was over at their apartment again, hanging out with them. And I was like, hey, so I know that Claire is leaving. And they're like, we actually thought about this and we would love for you to move in. And so that just turned out to be just the biggest non-issue.
That's awesome.
Like, thanks God.
Community is a big deal.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of the opposite thing of like, that part was really incredible and amazing, but community as a whole, and I work in a very large ministry. We have nearly 100 workers on between our 9 ministries, and not almost all of them, probably 75-80% of them are Ecuadorian.
Yeah.
But that does leave us with a really good sized North American community. Yeah. But even with that, I think that was something that I thought would be easy that turned out to be really hard. Was I kind of assumed that I would just find community with my coworkers. Yeah. And as much as I love them and as much as I do have a level of community with them, most of them are at different life phases and they have families and they have children. And so that's something that has been really hard is finding people that really connect with me, because either I have people that really, really understand where I'm at and what I'm doing and what life is like overseas, but they're not in my same life stage. Right. Or I have my friends back in the States who are in my same life stage and who love me so much, but ultimately don't really understand my day-to-day life. Right. And so that's been something that has been probably one of the harder aspects for me.
Yeah. Good question.
Thanks.
Kind of on the same lines of that just made me think of like, did you like kind of, or I don't know if your sending organization like set you up with the church, but kind of how was that with like going to church or like finding small groups, and also with like the language? I don't know if you knew Spanish beforehand or
no.
We were just talking about that actually.
So I actually attend, there is a church literally right across the street from my apartment complex that is called English Fellowship Church, and it is a church run, it was started 30-40 years ago by missionaries for missionaries. So it was basically to serve the English speaking community in Ecuador and in Quito, because there are several ministries that work in our area. And so I have been going there, and that was something that I found fairly easily just because it is basically the English speaking church. Yeah. But there are a lot of really good Spanish speaking churches that I would like to eventually be at a point in my Spanish where I can go and I can get, because there's a difference between understanding what's being said and understanding it to the point that I can think about the deeper meaning while I'm listening to it. And that's something that like I can follow along the conversation in Spanish, but I'm really, really focused on understanding what's being said as opposed to being able to process the message. And so I'm not really at a place with my Spanish yet where I could go and get a lot out of a Spanish speaking church. And it's all kind of a moot point right now anyway, because no churches are meeting because of COVID. But that's another thing. We'll see when churches start back up what ends up happening. But yeah, Spanish is something I did 3 months of 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, one-on-one tutoring before I actually started work. Right. And so that was a crash course in Spanish. And I'm conversational, but it's definitely so much room for improvement. So much.
But that's so cool to hear, like, even in the year you've been there, you're at a place in your Spanish where you can understand, and there's been so much growth. And that doesn't make the GoCore program, you feel like, and learn the language, you open up so many doors in that. And although maybe you're not fluent in it, you're at a place where you're conversational, and that's a huge skill. It's going to carry you so far there. That's really cool. Yeah. Good question. What other questions do y'all have for Julie?
Okay, so I have a question. So I'm currently a nursing student and I'm going to be graduating in May. And so I'm trying to kind of pray and just really discern what the Lord has next for me after I graduate. And I guess like my question is like, what would like, did you work in a hospital like before you went to the mission field? And if so, would you recommend getting that experience before going to the mission field? Like, just, I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, sorry, Goer, but I did. I worked in a hospital for 2 years before I went overseas, and I worked on 2 different units in that time. I started off doing hospice oncology on the adult side, and then doing pediatrics on that side of the world, that side of the lifespan.
Yeah.
And that was super important for me in my growth as a nurse. I feel like nursing school taught me a really great foundation, but then working in the hospital solidified a lot of those skills and a lot of my confidence, particularly then when I was ready to transition to doing ministry. I went from being in a hospital where I had coworkers around me all the time who I could ask questions to and just bounce ideas off of and say, hey, I think this, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
I was telling them earlier, I am the only healthcare provider in any of our 9 ministries that we have in Ecuador. And so I don't have anyone that I can say, hey, I think this, but I'm not sure. What are your thoughts? Which I do have resources that I can reach out to, but I probably would not have known about them if I hadn't worked in a hospital. And I would not have had the confidence in my own nursing skills and my abilities if I hadn't spent that time in the hospital prior to that. And that won't be the path for everybody, but in general, I would say that that's something that is super beneficial, particularly in the field of nursing, to be able to do that, but to do it strategically. And so I was really thoughtful with what unit I applied to when I was graduating and where I wanted to go from there so that I could get as much experience as possible in as short a time as possible, so I'd be ready to go on the field.
Yeah. And just to speak into that too, on like the coaching side, we have quite a few nurses, you're one of them, that go through our program, and some do work at a hospital beforehand and some do not. One of the beauties of GoCore is that all of the positions are what we call entry level, meaning there isn't the need necessarily to come in with so much experience or years under your belt, because in all of our teams, you are going to have mentorship and a team that is backing you up. So you're going to have people that are professionally and personally pouring into you, again, in a personal way. So how are you doing holistically, spiritually, physically, emotionally while you're serving? But also, how are you doing professionally? You know, like you were saying, is there a skill that you're not confident in that we can kind of build up? Is there a place where you're like, man, I really like this, but I'm not sure what to do with this? And so in all of the placements, whether it's a medical one or an educational one or a ministry focused one where you're planning churches, there is going to be a mentorship aspect, because GoCore only works with 20-something-year-olds. So I will say I've worked with a few nursing students that have gone through the program. Katie's on here and she's been working with GoCore a lot longer than me. She's also worked with a bunch of nursing students. And to be very honest, I think that was Julia that asked that question. The path for every nursing student has looked different based off of experience and where they're serving and what their degree looked like. But there is a place, I think, for both, kind of like you were saying, just based off of what you feel like is a need that you have at that time.
And that was something I really did appreciate about GoCore, was that I had that opportunity. Most of GoCore's applicants tend to come straight out of college, but that's not a requirement.
Totally.
And so I was able to go and get the experience that I needed before stepping onto the field. And it was something I was really nervous about, because I think anyone who's interested in ministry has heard the statistics about, if you don't go straight out of college, the percentage of people that end up deciding not to go at all is really high.
Right.
But I had a really great mentor speak into my life, and who knew that since I was 9 years old, this was something that had been on my heart.
Yeah.
And I told him about that concern, and he looked at me and went, nah, you're going to be fine. Like, if God tells you to go, you're going to go, because he knew me and my heart.
Right.
And so I think that's one thing of like, if this is something that you're really passionate about, that you really feel like God has put on your heart, don't be afraid of doing what you need to do to be prepared for that. But then also when the opportunity arises, it's okay, you can go for it. Like, there was never going to be a point where I felt perfectly prepared to go out into ministry.
Yes, that's very fair.
But I needed those 2 years of experience to be a safe nurse in an environment where I was the only nurse.
Right. Yeah. It goes back to that nudge you were talking about. We all get little pushes, and you kind of have to be there to answer that push when it comes.
Yeah.
That's a good question, Julia. Any other questions for Julie?
I was gonna say too, just because I feel like that was a question I had a lot, like before saying yes, but I just graduated from nursing school in May and I'm going, and like in this position, I like won't be like the only medical professional. So I think that like made me feel more comfortable, but I think like there were a lot of people telling me like you need to get the experience. And so I felt very kind of like, oh, am I doing the right thing? But I think the Lord has given me a peace about going anyway. And so hopefully that's encouraging that just everyone's path really does look different. And so, but I do have another question also. With COVID and all of that, like what has that looked like? And like, are you back now in the States because of COVID, or what is the situation?
Good question. The answer is indirectly, I'm back in the States because of COVID. So we were fully locked down for about 2.5 months. We had a 2 p.m. curfew, and you could not leave your house after 2 p.m. And prior to that, you could only leave your house for the most essential things, like going to get groceries or going to the pharmacy or the bank. And that was really hard, particularly being a healthcare provider in that, but we had to get creative with how to get me to the house to be able to actually do healthcare things.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so I did a lot of things from my apartment and set up protocols and did a lot of policy work and training the staff on what to do.
Yeah.
And so that was a lot of how COVID affected us and affected me and my role. And then when we actually had a COVID scare at the house. And so I moved into the house, which turned out to only be for the weekend, but it was kind of like, I'm here until our participant is better, no matter how long that takes.
Yeah.
And so it was really just a lot of being flexible with what came, and we didn't know what would come.
Yeah.
I am back in the States now, which actually probably leads us into something for the rest of the night, because one of the ministries that we have is called Esperanza Art, which means hope art. And that is a ministry in which women from our residential, our non-residential, and our street outreach program to women working in prostitution can learn to make jewelry, like I've got on my necklace tonight. And they earn money for each piece of jewelry that they make. And then we turn around and sell the jewelry, and the rest of the profits go back into our ministry to help us be more sustainable. And typically one of the biggest ways that we sell that jewelry is by any team that comes through our ministries in Ecuador have the chance to purchase our jewelry. And so COVID happened, and we had no teams come this year, where typically we have 20 to 30 teams that come through a year. So we took a financial hit because of that. And so as a team, we said, all right, if we can't have people come to Ecuador, I can go to the States. And so I'm traveling with a coworker, and we started off in New Hampshire and are back all the way down to Texas and selling some of the jewelry. And I think that you guys will actually get the website, the link to our ministry tomorrow, probably when you get the email. And so you will have that, but we have a special surprise for you guys with the jewelry a little bit later, but I don't know. There might be a few more things we have to do before we get there.
There will be. So I mentioned, and it was kind of mentioned on our Facebook post, if you saw this on social media, that there was going to be a live giveaway tonight, and that live giveaway is actually going to be some jewelry from Esperanza Art. So in a little bit, I'm going to have Katie hand me some names. I'm actually going to let Julie randomly pick somebody on this call tonight to receive a matching, I think we picked a necklace and a bracelet, right?
A necklace and a bracelet,
yes.
Or you have the choice for earrings and necklace.
Yes, yes. So we'll kind of hold them up and show you. So we'll get to that in a little bit, but be on the lookout for your name. Oh, it looks like right now Katie is bringing me the papers. Perfect. All right. So we're going to do the giveaway now. All right, Julie. These are all the names of those on this meeting tonight. So go ahead and pick a random name. Did you close your eyes?
I did.
So awesome. Okay.
All right. Tammy.
Tammy. Where is Tammy?
Let's see if we can.
Let's see if we can.
I think that's supposed to say Jamie.
Oh, that's a J. Jamie. Sorry, Jamie.
Jamie, you have one tonight. So I'm guessing this is going to be for your wife, which this could be a great gift. For those of you that don't know, he mentioned that his wife is pregnant and is 3 days past due date. So Jamie, maybe this is a good gift. There are two options. I'm going to hold them up, Jamie, and then you can let me know which one you prefer. So will you hold that one up? So the first set, if you want to explain it to you, can, is earrings and a matching necklace. I don't know if you can see that, Jamie.
Yeah. Cute.
One gold.
And then I'll actually pull this out so you can see it a little bit better. Second one is a necklace and then a bracelet.
So
there we go.
Rainbow and then neutral. So Jamie,
you know, it's tough. I wish she could come up here right now, but she's in the shower.
nice.
She likes purple, but she doesn't like big earrings.
Ooh,
so
nice.
I'm thinking option 2.
Okay,
good
option
choice.
2 it is. Well, Jamie, I will get your address since I know you anyway. I will get your address and I'll get that in the mail to you as soon as possible. But if you guys are interested in looking at that, I think you said there were so many other colors and so many other designs.
So many options.
Yeah, I think Katie linked it on the side chat, but I'm also going to send a follow-up email tomorrow and I will put the link of the website on there so you guys can do maybe some Christmas shopping on there. I know that I am. But with that being said, hopefully you got to ask your questions. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But I think we're going to go ahead and start wrapping up because it's already 7:45 based off the time that I can see. But I just want to thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, Julie, for coming. I know that you've had a crazy time since being in the States, but thank you for taking time out of your night to share with us about the work that you're doing in Ecuador and for really giving us some insight of what it looks like to be a goer, actually living on the field in the midst of COVID. So to wrap up a little bit, Julie, is there any last thoughts you would share with those that are on this event tonight? Anything else that you want to get out there before we kind of wrap up tonight?
Yeah, I think just what kind of I felt like God was nudging as we were talking earlier, just this idea of what is it that God is calling you to? And we use that word calling to mean so many different things. And a lot of times when we talk about it in a missions or ministry context, I feel like it has context. It has a little bit of a different connotation. It's like this special lightning bolt moment that God like sent from the sky. And that's not always how God calls us. And I feel like when we talk about calling, it really is just being in step with Jesus of what is it that he is putting in front of you at any given moment in your life and walking with him through whether he's calling you to go overseas or whether he's calling you to sit with him and listen to his voice or whatever it is. And so just really encouraging you guys, particularly in this season of COVID when everything seems crazy, remembering that he is the path that we are called to follow and that he is the voice that we can trust. And so just really encourage you guys in that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such a good word to share with everybody, because although not everyone is going to the field and your mom's out there, I think that's such a good word for anybody in any life stage, is to just really trust and follow the Lord and where you're at. So thank you for sharing that. I would love to
Thank
just
you.
end our time in a quick prayer for Julie and the work that she's a part of in Ecuador. So if you guys would just bow your heads with me. God, I thank you for Julie, and I thank you for, man, the work that is happening in Ecuador, Father, and the ways that you are using her and growing her, both professionally in the skills she's gaining as a nurse, but also personally, Lord, and the ways that you are just growing her heart and her compassion and her patience, God. Lord, I just thank you for the amazing year she's had, God, and for the lives that she's impacted in your name. God, we ask that you would continue to multiply her efforts. Lord, I just pray that you would continue to use her as a light in that house and with the women that she's working with. God, would you continue to speak through her? Would you continue to use her as a vessel and as, man, just salt and light for those that she comes in contact with, even on the streets or in the bus as she takes that ride to get to Casa Dalia. Lord, would you, God, just provide fruit for her time here in the States? Lord, would they be able to raise the funds needed for these ministries? God, would you just bring people into her life that are excited about the work she's doing and the beautiful jewelry that these women are making? Lord, we know that you are a God that is in the ministry of reconciliation. And we just thank you that you've called Julie into that you have called her to be part of reconciliation with these women and these lives and the kids that she's getting to work with, Lord. So would you continue to just have your hand on the work that's happening there in Ecuador, Lord? Would you continue to build up community for Julie, God? Would you bring encouraging friends into her life? Would you use that church she's a part of, God, just to speak truth into her? Lord, we love you so much. We're thankful for Julie. I thank you for the people that were able to join tonight for this event. Lord, would you just bless their weeks? And would you continue to speak to all of us, Lord, and continue to guide us as we put one foot in front of the other, Lord, and just walk with you. Lord, we love you so much, and it's your name we pray tonight. Amen.